Welcome to the First Light Surf Club Spotlight Session. This is a show where we dive into conversations and stories with creatives, entrepreneurs, and people we admire both in and out of the water. I'm the host, John Hall, and today we have the privilege to speak with an award-winning filmmaker, a storyteller, a creative, a surfer, cold water surf enthusiast, a husband, a future father, and most importantly, my neighbor, Ben Weiland.
Indeed, yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming, Ben. Super stoked to have you. I feel like this has been a long time coming.
Yeah. I think we're 900 feet apart, or is it 900 yards apart?
Whatever it is, it's close, and I'm pretty sure I could throw a stone and hit your house from my house. So, Ben's a great guy. I have the privilege to call him a friend, and today we're just going to dive into his story of how he got to where he is in the film industry. So, Ben, if you mind just giving a brief overview of your background, and you were born in Germany, and start from way back.
I was born in Germany, born and raised in Germany till I was 11, and my parents were missionaries over there. So I grew up speaking German. All my friends were German, went to public school in Germany, and then we moved to the States when I was in 5th grade. So we moved to Dallas for 2 years, and then eventually my mom's work took us to San Diego. And so we lived here for a few years, and then when I turned 16, I got my driver's license and used that opportunity to start to surf. And I was never into team sports really, maybe a little bit of skiing. I did martial arts when I was a kid, but once I got my first surfboard, it was like game over, like everything changed, and I was obsessed, and just was surfing every single opportunity that I had. I joined the surf PE that my school had, which is pretty funny to think about that's actually a class that you could sign up for. But yeah, I was just obsessed with surfing, and I went to college at Point Loma University in downtown San Diego. And the main motivation was definitely the surf.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think we can all relate, like our first intro into surfing. A lot of us can remember like that feeling that we got. And
oh yeah, I remember the first wave I ever caught. It was at Oceanside Harbor, and I can just picture it in my mind. It's crazy. Like that feeling was like nothing I've ever experienced before. Just like that glide.
Yeah.
And it felt like probably like a 10-foot wave. But it was probably like knee high.
Fortunately, you weren't filming that, so you'll never have to know how small it actually was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was so stoked. It was out South Jetty, like on the north side of South Jetty. So it was probably like this time of year too.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So then you go to Point Loma and you're studying design, graphic design. How did your passion for design and creating, how did that kind of come about?
I was always really interested in art when I was a kid, and as far back as I can remember, I was drawing and just filling reams and reams of paper with doodles and artwork. And I'm an only child, so I would just spend hours by myself in my room drawing, and my parents would just like give me a steady supply of paper, and we're like, all right, I guess he's good. But once I got into high school, I started to think of like, okay, what would be like a career path for me? And honestly, I always just wanted to be like an animator or an artist for a company like Disney and make movies.
Yeah.
But in high school, it didn't really seem practical or realistic. So I kind of shifted into thinking graphic design might be a good career path. And so when I looked at Point Loma and Cal Poly and UCSD, I was kind of thinking, what is their graphic design program like? And so at Point Loma, they actually had a design program, which at the time was actually kind of a surprise. It was rare to find that in 2004. And it was really small there. The program was really small, but it turned out to be like phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because the professors that were teaching there were like really talented and plugged in with the design community in San Diego and had some really good experience, and were just great people.
Yeah.
And so even though it was like a small program, it was like really, really good. And like the other students became really good friends. And I still have some of my lifelong friends from there.
That's awesome. So then at this point, you're surfing in California, San Diego. Point Loma is not exactly a cold weather place. So how did your love for cold water and Arctic surfing come about?
Well, I studied abroad in New Zealand in my junior year of college, and I had a buddy who'd been there the prior year, and he told me the best place you can go is the South Island of New Zealand in a town called Dunedin, which is so far south that it gets snow in the wintertime sometimes. And so I showed up there with two of my close friends, and we didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into. But by the time the semester was ending, it was snowing and the waves were pumping. And it's the kind of place where you can't really just pull up your car at the beach and park and go surf. It's like you're actually hiking into places and you're in wild nature. Some of the spots have penguins on the beach, and it felt super exploratory. And just realizing that there's places in the world where you can experience surfing through this lens of adventure and discovery, backpacking, camping, and exploration was really exciting to me. And also there's like this element of unknown, because a lot of the surf spots down there actually don't either have names or aren't really like well known. And so we were just looking for places that might have good waves and finding spots. And that was a really eye-opening experience to rock up to a spot and there's nobody out, and you don't know how many people have ever surfed this place, but you have it to yourself.
Yeah. And I'm sure growing up in Germany, and your family sounds like they have some adventure bug to them. So, do you think that exploratory, adventure-minded sense kind of come from your family and your parents?
Yeah, so my dad's side of the family has a lot of background in mountaineering and climbing. My grandpa had climbed peaks on 6 of all 7 continents in the Himalayas and Andes, and he would come back with slides of his adventures. Like, he'd take photos and share them with all the grandkids and tell stories about his exploits. And that was always really inspiring. And my uncle had moved up to Alaska as an ice climber and pioneered a lot of ice climbing routes up there in the 70s and 80s with Jeff Lowe. And then on the other side, my grandpa was really into hunting and fishing up in Northern California. And so having both of those sides of the family kind of exposed me to the outdoors, kind of made me fall in love with it. And I was definitely more of a timid kid growing up. Like, I was all about just staying inside and like doing artwork, you know. But I had an appreciation for those places and always admired like what my grandparents did. And so when I realized that this new passion that I have for surfing actually intersected with being in these wild, remote places, it felt like the perfect fit for me. Like, two worlds collided, and it really felt surreal. Like, nowadays, I think there is a lot of understanding that you can surf in these places and that it is very much part of the surf experience. But for me, I was kind of in this Southern California bubble where everything's like asphalt parking lots, Starbucks on the beach, like that kind of thing. And so it really blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the surf culture has definitely changed a lot in those past 10 years, emphasizing more of the search, and videos like yours have been kind of bringing that more mainstream, like going to the lesser reached coastlines. So yeah, I feel like it's kind of a really cool experience to be seeing these crazy outdoor picturesque sights and these empty waves, and being able to experience that with your closest friends and not a giant crowd. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see how that kind of captivated your fascination. Yeah. So then I'm familiar with your story a little bit, and I know the Google Earth Challenge, how Surfer Mag presented this challenge. Can you fill me in on when exactly in the timeline that was in your college career, and then fill in that story a little bit, or tell?
Yeah, so after I graduated college, I I couldn't find a job doing graphic design like I had hoped. And I ended up going to work for my uncle's door and window business here in Oceanside. And during that time, I kind of set aside all my hopes and dreams of becoming a graphic designer at an agency. But in my free time, I started a blog called Arctic Surf. And the reason I started that is because Surfing Magazine had the Google Earth Challenge, where you could submit a surf spot that you'd find on Google Earth. And if it won, they would actually take you there and you could surf it. And it was like, the point was to find undiscovered waves that have never been found or surfed before. And so I was thinking, like, everybody's looking at warm water places. I wonder if there's anything up in cold regions like Alaska or Iceland. And I started looking around and actually finding spots that looked really promising. And I submitted those, didn't win, which I'm not surprised, because, like, why would you pick a cold place over like somewhere in Mexico?
Yeah. Do you remember where the spot was that won?
There's a few. One of them was Skeleton Bay. Actually, Skeleton Bay was discovered through Google Earth Challenge.
Oh, wow.
And that made the cover of Surfing Magazine. And then there was another place in Mexico, and I think there might have been 3 total. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But yeah, so I found these spots, and then I was like, I don't really know what to do with this, but it's kind of just a fun, nerdy hobby to look around on Google Earth and find things. And one of my best friends who had been with me in New Zealand was like, you should start a blog and, like, post these.
Yeah.
And my thought was, like, blogs are no longer popular. Even back in 2009, it was kind of like already past. And the other thing is, like, I have maybe had 5 or 6 spots. So I was like, I don't really have enough content to, like, commit myself to this and keep this going.
Well, like, in that time you were, like, taking the Google Earth screenshot, but then
just saving it in a folder.
What were you, like, writing though for the blog?
Well, at first I was just saving it into a folder and showing it to my friends. And then I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And then with my graphic design background, I got super into designing the look of the site and, like, the logo and everything and branding it. And I wrote these little articles, and the articles were just, with no knowledge of what any of these places are.
Was it like fiction or like?
It was like semi-fiction, tongue-in-cheek, like how absurd would it be to surf in these places? And the whole point was to kind of be a joke. Like, you could surf in these places and it's actually really great, and everybody's dying to surf here. And people are, like, trying to protect the secrets of these spots. And in my mind, it was like, nobody ever would want to go here to surf.
Yeah. So in this time, you're working for your dad or your uncle's window and door company. Are you doing anything creative in that job? Or
I was helping manage photo shoots of the doors and, like, designing brochures, designing the website, that kind of stuff.
So at that point, you gave up on being an animator for Disney, or at least put that off for the time being, and you were just committed to working for your uncle's company. And then this Arctic Surf kind of comes up as a little, like, passion project. Did you ever, like, see it go anywhere? Because at this point, you didn't even have, like, filmmaking or, like, journalism on your radar as a professional, like, path.
No, not at all. It was just a joke. And then I got an email from Chris Burkard, who is one of the photographers on staff at Surfer Magazine. And I knew who he was. He was, like, one of the best travel photographers in surfing and just had incredible images. And that email came in not long after I started the blog. And I thought it was my friends playing a prank on me, because I thought,
pretty good prank.
There's, like, no way this is real. And so I kind of responded pretty cheekily, I guess. I just he was like, hey, I've seen some of the spots you're posting, like, we should chat sometime and maybe plan a trip to one of these places. And I was like, oh yeah, sure, like, let me see what my schedule looks like.
Maybe that, like, helps you out. You sounded more official rather than, like, super eager, like, experience.
And also, I think the design experience I had that I brought to the website made the website feel more legitimate.
Yeah.
even though it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that kind of like resonates with like First Light Surf Club is a side project, passion project, but then doing it well and not cutting corners, and like still having the aesthetic and the look and like everything being buttoned up. So you don't know what kind of like doors could open up.
Yeah.
Or who could call you one day and give you an opportunity.
How important that first impression is. It's crazy. So yeah, so then it actually did turn out to be him, and we met up in a little diner up in San Clemente and just had this really long conversation, frothing out about locations. And here I am, like, I've never been to any of these places.
Were you upfront with that about him in the beginning? Like, did he know like you actually hadn't been to any of those places, or were you just kind of faking it?
No. I mean, he knew there's like no way I could fake that, you know. But he didn't really seem to care.
Yeah.
I was surprised. But he did ask me questions like as if I did have deep knowledge about these places.
Yeah.
And my answers would always just be like, I don't really know. Like, I'll have to look into that.
I kind of look back at the archive and see what my field notes say.
Yeah. So then we decided to pitch a project to Surfer Magazine. And the first one that we pitched was South Island of New Zealand, because I had gone to school there and I knew the area, and there hadn't been any articles published about it. And so we put this pitch deck together, gave it to the editor of the magazine, had this call, and the editor was like, yeah, this looks sick. Like, I just got a photo across my desk of New Zealand and it's pumping down there. Like, let's do this article. The photo he'd seen was like from a completely different part of New Zealand. And then on the call, he just goes, who's going to write the article? Who do you guys have? And we didn't have anybody, but I just said, I'll write it.
Yeah.
And I had zero writing experience.
Yeah. Was any like part of you like, what if they like find out? Like,
I was shaking. I was sweating. I was terrified. So I just volunteered myself, and then was surprised that there's no
pushback.
There was no pushback, and there's
Resume
like, they didn't ask to see any other writing of mine. Like, I hadn't written anything since like a high school essay.
I feel like that'd be different today. Like, budgets back then in the surf industry, like, send them. Now they're like, all right, let me see like your past 20 years of work and make sure you're worth the money.
Well, even the fact that Chris was like a full-time professional surf photographer on staff was like, that's so rare nowadays.
Yeah.
You know, but back then there's like these magazines with like full staff photographers that were just focused on travel or just focused on the tour. So it was like very different back then. So yeah, that was the first trip. And then I brought a little camcorder with me on that trip, and I had so much free time. Like, as a writer, you're not doing a whole lot except taking notes. And a lot of times I'm not surfing because the waves are too challenging for me, but the guys are like out there surfing. They're professional, you know? And then, so I just filmed these guys surfing on this camcorder that Pete DeVries, one of the surfers, had loaned to me. And then I actually submitted that footage to the magazine, and they paid me for it to make a little tiny edit that they put on their website. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like, they'll actually pay me for this. And it was like edited in iMovie.
Yeah. Have you like looked back at that footage? And
it's still on YouTube.
Like, oh, is it?
Yeah.
How can we find it?
It's on Surfer Mag's channel. It's called like New Zealand Deep South.
Okay.
There's 2 episodes. It's so grainy and shaky. The footage is crazy.
Because I was like, you didn't film anything prior to that. So that was your first like step into.
Yeah. I mean, except I used to love making videos with my friends in high school. So yeah.
In good high school.
Yeah. But also that was kind of near the beginning of YouTube.
Yeah.
So any video that you put on YouTube is novel and exciting, you know?
Yeah.
And so people were stoked. They're like, this is really cool. Like, beautiful shots and crazy location. And so after that, Chris and I would do 1 or 2 trips a year with the magazine. And every trip I would try to learn something new about filmmaking or upgrade my equipment a little bit. And I was just pouring in my own money into gear and whatnot. and trying to like invest in that and level it up a little bit. But I wasn't really getting a lot back. It would just kind of like break even.
Yeah.
But it was just like out of my own interest and creative excitement. Like, I think being an artist, I don't necessarily always like make the best business decisions, but I was just like excited about this pursuit. And so I just poured myself into it and just wanted to see how far I could build it. And so a number of years down the road, I eventually quit my job at my uncle's business.
Yeah. How much time was that about?
Maybe 6 years.
Okay.
5 or 6 years. Yeah, I just eventually quit that job and just started doing video full time.
Because you're taking those 5 years, just taking your vacation to go on this trip, vacation days, however much PTO you had to go on this trip.
Yeah.
And you're like incrementally growing your craft, learning your skills. Like how long did that, I guess 5 years, but what was that process like being comfortable enough to leave a full-time paying job to jump out on your own and start doing this freelance videography?
It was terrifying. Yeah, it was pretty scary. I mean, I always felt really on edge about it, and I always questioned whether it was foolish to do that, to leave a consistent job and go after this thing that has no path marked out for it. And I had no idea where it was going, and it didn't really seem like a sustainable job. Like, where is this leading? And it felt like that for probably 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
10 years after you made the jump to full-time video?
Maybe 7 years, maybe. Just because I never really knew what I'd be doing like a month or two out. Like, it was always unknown.
Yeah.
But the new projects always would appear. And so I would just do it. And the deeper you go, you're like, I'm really investing myself in this, and I don't want to go so far down this road that I can't get back out.
Yeah.
And then you see,
always have an exit plan.
Yeah. And I would see my friends like getting other kinds of like stable jobs and wondering like, should I be doing that? Like, that seems like a wise choice, you know?
Yeah.
But new doors would always open up. And so I felt like I would always just step into that and feel like I could always make a shift if I needed to. Like, why not see this through?
Yeah. So would you say it was a passion that you had for videography and creating that really was the catalyst that made you make the leap into that?
That, but mostly just the storytelling and adventure of it.
Yeah.
To me, the video and filmmaking was more of a vehicle to tell the stories. And so I just wanted to learn those things as much as I could to tell the story. But I really wanted to just get that story across.
Yeah.
And so that's what motivated me to do video, because if it wasn't for the adventure and the exploration, I don't know if I would have gotten into video, because that just happened to be the vehicle for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there one like film in particular where after doing that, you're like, wow, this is where my life needs to be like working on?
Yeah. So I did a film with Chris Burkard called Under an Arctic Sky.
Yeah.
And that was one of the many magazine trips that we did. That wasn't really supposed to be much more than an article for that year. And it ended up being a really crazy trip that we turned into a feature-length film, and then ended up touring that all across the US and worldwide. And seeing that trip get built out into like a full film that people would come to a theater to watch was really eye-opening. And I think that's when I realized this is more than just kind of a scrappy side job, but this is actually something that can keep growing, like even beyond what I expected it to grow.
Yeah.
And it also made me realize there's an audience of people beyond just the core surf community that can appreciate these stories, that are actually really interested in adventure and exploration films.
Yeah. Cause I mean, I've seen your videos, and the storytelling that you do in it is all really, really fascinating, interesting stuff. It's not like all surfing. You're actually weaving in people's like stories and talking about the cultural communities that you're visiting. So So, and it's amazing, like, backdrops that people are surfing and that people haven't seen before. So I think when people see that, it resonates outside of surf, which is cool. Do you think it's the niche that you found in the filming industry that kind of helped propel you into success? Like the cold water niche, not many people were doing that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like you said, it's not just about the best possible waves and the most high level performance surfing. The story kind of shifts off of that into more of the adventure itself and the story and the location and the challenges of getting to these places and searching for the waves.
Yeah.
And that's inherently a different kind of story. And it's a story that I think is a little broader, and it applies to so many different facets of life and different pursuits. So if you're into skiing or backpacking or fishing or climbing, you experience a lot of the same kinds of things as when you're in Alaska looking for waves, you know. And I think that's something that just resonates on a deeper level that's not as specific to core surfing.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've just realized over time. And, you know, I just showed my new film in Bozeman, Montana last week, and people were really stoked on it. And I wasn't sure how I was going to put a surf film in Montana. But that town is a very big hub for adventure, for skiing and snowboarding and mountain biking, all that. And I just realized, you know, people might never have surfed, but they understand, like they live that life themselves every day when they go mountain biking in the hills and looking for new trails and new routes. It's a very similar kind of way of life.
Yeah. So looking back at the trajectory you took, it was kind of a slow on-ramp. And when you're talking to other aspiring videographers that want to get to like the level they see you at, what advice do you have to give them? Like, it's just a long process. Like, buckle up. Or what do you?
That was my path. I think my biggest advice would be with a creative pursuit. I've seen that you have to be prepared to invest your own time and money to build what you're doing and get yourself to a place that people recognize your ability level and that you're actually able to do something that resonates with other people. And for example, if you go to college to get a degree, you are spending a ton of money. You're spending a minimum 4 years to educate yourself and get expertise so that when you graduate, you have the opportunity to be considered for a job in that field, right? And so imagine if you took that amount of money and just poured it into learning something like filmmaking and didn't expect to make any money from it for 4 years, just building your skills, meeting other people, learning from people. And then at the end of 4 years, you might be able to get a job doing that. It's kind of an interesting way to look at the reality of what it takes to master something, or not even master it, but just to kind of get an entry level step into that field.
Yeah.
But with creative jobs and filmmaking in particular, I think there's a sense in which we often think as soon as I have a camera in my hand, I'm ready to go and I can start getting client work, getting jobs, making films. And it's just not the case. And so it is a rough road if you're trying to just slowly chip away at that over time.
Have you ever thought back and wondered, like, in the alternate universe that Chris Burkard never called you, like, what you'd be doing with this passion of yours of storytelling and where your life would be and career would be?
Yeah,
now?
I have no idea because I had no plan. After college, once the design job thing fell through and didn't really materialize, I kind of just, that was the only thing I had in my mind that I wanted to do, and kind of just gave up on that and was like, just trying to find contentment in where I was in life and just coast along, but I wasn't very proactive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I think starting the Arctic Surf blog and like doing that, like you were fulfilling the passion of storytelling through that avenue. And I think it's a good testament to like do what you need to do to make money. But then if that's not fulfilling the passion and whatever itch that you have, don't be afraid to try something that you're stoked about and then be available and ready when a call comes.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't try it, you'll never know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could always go to work at McDonald's or find some other thing that I could learn and do. And so I just felt like in my mind, I had prepared myself for anything. And I think that freed me up to be willing to take the risk. So,
yeah. As you're traveling on these film projects, you're going with the crew and meeting amazing surfers and other creatives, and you're meeting people from all over the world and making friends. And I'm curious what community means to you, and also when you come home, like how do you balance all the traveling with staying rooted in at your home?
Yeah, originally when I started traveling a lot, it did feel like very disjointed because I was meeting people from all around the world, but they weren't really people here. And so I always felt like my community was here, like this is my people, and then I go off and meet these other people that I may never see again. And I also didn't realize I'd be doing this for so long. But over time, as I've gotten to know those people abroad in a deeper way, they've become also some of my closest friends. And so those two groups have like kind of merged a lot more, but it used to be like a very separate thing. And that was definitely tough to feel like I was kind of split between two places. And so I've kind of over time consciously tried to merge the two more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has it changed any after getting married a couple years ago? And then also as you look to like having your child soon, like have you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, my mindset as soon as I got married, and then also again, like now that my wife's pregnant, has definitely just in an instant changed to thinking more of like, all right, like how is this going to look? Like, what does my travel look like? How is it going to affect the family? And for me, I actually like already was not wanting to travel as much. Like I never was like seeking to travel all the time. Like some people are just like, I want to always be on the road.
Yeah.
And I was always the opposite. I'm like very much a homebody. And so I was always trying to like reduce the amount of time I'm away. 'Cause it does make me feel like very fractured if I'm not kind of around enough to like have solid friendships at home. So then when I got married, and then also now, I just think of like, how can I focus on less projects and bigger ones that I can be more focused on? So the time that is spent away is more purposeful and reasonable.
Yeah.
So instead of doing a bunch of really short projects in a row, maybe like one longer one, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of traveling, one of the cool things that I've got to experience through First Light Surf Club is getting connected with people from all over the United States, and as well as like outside of the United States and other countries, and seeing how people's love of the ocean and the thrill that they get from surfing like goes across borders and communities. Can you speak to what you've experienced going to like the farthest reaches of the world and like having this commonality of surfing with these people that you're meeting?
Yeah, it's so crazy. I mean, surfing takes you to the strangest places that you'd never go to if it wasn't for surfing, you know? And then especially like cold water surfing, it like narrows it down even more. And so I've met so many amazing people, and in Iceland and Alaska and Norway, it's just really special. And it is something that really crosses a lot of divides. And so as soon as you find somebody who's interested in surfing and in cold water surfing, it's like, whoa, this is crazy. Like this is pretty rare. So yeah, it's been really cool. I just have lifelong friendships with people, and in these places, and it's special to share that for sure.
Yeah, that is cool. Speaking of traveling, and you said it can be a grind traveling all the time, and also like having tight deadlines, and I'm sure you can get burnt out on specific jobs. And how do you kind of recharge and reset, like either through surfing or through the passion, or like your passion of creating? Like, how do you like reset yourself?
Just by being home.
Yeah.
Like, I just love being home and settled and having some quiet time to myself. And the cool thing about filmmaking is that part of it is capturing the footage, but then there's also the part on the back end of editing, going through the footage and telling the story. And it almost has this built-in cycle or rhythm that kind of puts you in these intense situations, and then you come out of it and have time to kind of rest and recover. And I love that creative time when it's quiet, you're at home, you're just kind of getting to see all the footage that you collected and tinkering with it. And that to me is like really refreshing. So yeah, there's always deadlines that come up and then you have to like rush it. But when it's not rushed, I would spend my free time just editing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it the editing process that you like the creativity really comes out, or is it like pre-trip, like planning like what you're going to shoot, or like building out the storylines? Like when is like the creative process really?
Well, it's at the start. Like,
yeah.
For example, if I am planning a cold water trip to some new place I've never been, there's this period of time when you're just imagining and dreaming of what this project could be, and you're researching. And as I'm looking into these places, it kind of fills my mind with all these ideas of how to capture this and what would be really cool. And so I think through those scenarios, and then, you know, you're planning where you're going to stay and like who you're going to be with and all those things. And those are all creative decisions. And then when you're on the ground, you're kind of, everything's happening a lot faster and a lot less control. It's a little bit more chaotic, but you're also composing shots and seeing new things for the first time and kind of taking those things in. And then in the editing stage, you're really refining that story and kind of trying to draw out what you captured. And so there's 3 separate stages, I would say, that are independently creative in their own way.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've got your own like passion project films that you're pitching to companies to come sponsor and like fund you filming and fund the trip. And then you also have some commercial work that you do. How do you balance the two? Because it sounds like, from my understanding, is commercial work pays better, but then you might not have that creative freedom that you desire. Like, yeah, how do you balance the two in terms of making money and getting to be creative?
Yeah, I would say I do a lot of commercial work throughout the whole year. But as of the last 4 or 5 years, I've always had one big creative project that I've tackled. Like the last one was Island X, which was a full-length surf film. And then now the new one is The Search for Volcano Island. And so I have a film production company called Fielder Films, and I work with Brian Davis, and we make these films together. And so over the last 9 months, we put all of our attention on the Volcano Island, but in and around that, we've gotten commercial jobs, clients, and shoots. And then those always get prioritized because those are, you know, jobs that right now are happening and they're paying. But then the longer, bigger film project kind of just spans 9 months of time, and we work on that in between when we don't have the client work.
Okay. Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, Island X took like 3 years to fully...
Yeah, that was a crazy one because we started that one before COVID. And then COVID came and all the flights to the island got shut down. And then I actually thought we might never go back because we didn't have the sponsorship to support going back. But then we did another round of pitching to the sponsors, and the flights started up again, and we actually went back, and it turned into a full-length film that I didn't know if it was going to be a full-length film, but it kind of just evolved.
Yeah. No, that film was really cool watching. I'm really stoked on your next Search for Volcano Island.
I'm really excited to share it.
I wanted to ask, I guess, shifting gears a little bit. I know last year you had a brain tumor and had some head surgery. I'm curious how that experience going through that has shifted your view on life and your work. And
yeah, so not last summer, I guess it was 2 summers ago, I was in Germany with my parents and my wife, and I had a tonic-clonic seizure and was unconscious for, I think it was 2 minutes. And I had never, ever had something like this happen before. So it was a total shock to all of us. And my initial response was shock. It just felt surreal. And when you get a diagnosis of having a brain tumor, my first thought is like, well, like, it's over, like, that's all I know about brain tumors is that they're life-threatening. And so that first week of being in Germany was crazy. And then the initial feedback was like, oh, this is probably not super critical, but let's just monitor it for a while and see what happens. And so we came back, and then I spent the next year just kind of cruising and seeing what would happen, because if you don't have to operate on it, that's a good thing too. And so I was taking medication to kind of like hold back seizures and that kind of stuff. And then eventually I did have another seizure when I was on tour for Island X. And at that point I realized, like, okay, let's have surgery and like get this taken care of. Because for me, like, surfing was not really safe anymore either, because if you have a seizure while you're surfing, then you could drown. You probably would drown. So it really had changed my life for that year. And so, yeah, during that time, there's so many questions about life, like, what do I want to be doing and what's my path in life supposed to be? But when something like that happens, all of that really narrows down to realizing what's important in life, like faith, family, and friends, and just making it through this. And it just really simplifies it. And that simplicity was actually kind of nice.
Yeah.
It just made life really focused, and I knew what I needed to be doing. And so then I had surgery, and it was like awake brain surgery. So I was awake for part of it. And then after that I was cured. Like, it was totally over.
Wow.
And so it has changed my perspective a lot, of mainly just what it means to go through difficult times and challenging times. And it brought me and my wife Marissa a lot closer together through that, and actually was a huge blessing, because it just gave us a lot more strength and stability in our relationship.
Yeah.
Just knowing that we could weather that, and just giving me a lot more confidence in who I am.
Yeah.
And then now that that's over, I kind of went back to like things as usual.
Yeah.
So I don't think it really affected me in terms of my job too much, but definitely like on the deeper things.
Yeah. Dang. Well, I'm super glad that it wasn't anything more serious, and that nothing no lingering effects have happened from that tumor.
Yeah.
That's super scary though.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine. Dang. Well, jumping, I guess, how do you jump back in from that?
Well, it's its own like journey into the unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, sometimes you look for it, but sometimes it comes to you. And so, yeah, I think the lessons I've learned from that will definitely carry forward in everything. But it does make me think that there are some things that it's worth taking the risk on and going for that adventure. And until you go through it, like, you don't really have a chance to grow into that area. Like I really feel like all these trips that I've been on over the years, like I actually never really sought to go on these trips, but a lot of those opportunities came to me. And there was a lot of fear and stepping into that unknown of a job that's freelance and all that. And then even with the brain tumor, like I didn't ask for that either. But I look back on all that and I'm grateful because it has taught me so many lessons about life that I've been able to grow from.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would never, I don't wish for myself to go through any like crazy challenges or like anxiety or health problems, but I have seen that stepping into those things is what grows you as a person.
Yeah, no, I definitely can see that just from this conversation, how you kind of leaned into those hard situations and have learned every step of the way and like taken the time and like whatever life threw at you to kind of roll with it. And I think that's really cool and impressive to see in you, which I'm curious if you could look back at your career and see like how you've grown and how your film storytelling and all that has like transitioned to where it is today. How would you say it's kind of evolved over since 2006?
Yeah.
Whenever that first.
I mean, I think originally I was just psyched to get through these cold places that were super trippy and weird and beautiful and scenic. Now that's not really enough to capture my imagination. It's part of it, but I want to go deeper into storytelling, into human stories, into people and who they are and what motivates them and like why we go on these adventures and what it is that excites us and what that means as an artist and as a surfer and as a creative. And so that's a path that I've been going down in the last few years, aside from just the shock value of like, you can surf in Iceland. It's possible, you know?
Yeah. So this next film that you premiered recently in Bozeman and you're getting ready, the whole rollout, Search for Volcano Island. Can you share with us a little bit about what makes this video special, why you're excited to bring it to everybody?
Yeah, so of all the places I've been to, this is a region in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska that I never thought I would get to. It's so remote. There's no planes that land there. It's super dangerous to go by boat. Like the islands have zero infrastructure. And actually, some of those islands are uncharted.
Still,
and that I haven't really been documented outside of science. Like there hasn't been photography or filmmaking documentation of these places in a proper way. So, and then on top of that, to think that there could be waves out there that have never been seen or surfed just blew my mind. So I kind of went without much expectation except to document whatever happened. And it ended up becoming a full-length film about that voyage.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it's a crazy one. I mean, the islands are all active volcanoes. There's glaciers, there's hot springs, there's crazy sea life out there. So yeah, it was just a surreal experience, and I'm super excited to show the film. It's taken a lot of hard work over the last 9 months putting it together.
Yeah.
And we're going to do some events in September.
So how can people find out more about this film that is coming out and how they can watch it?
I'm going to have all the event dates on my website, fielderfilms.com, and also on my Instagram. I'll be sharing about that.
We'll have links down in the bio of whatever video you're watching this on, Spotify, YouTube. Yeah, definitely check out that, and we'll post about it on the First Light Surf Club channel as well, because we're stoked on the work you're doing and want to promote it to this community and audience as much as we can. Yeah, is there, I guess, any like last pieces of advice or
First Light Surf Club, smash the subscribe button and like.
He said it so well, I don't even need to say it anymore. Thanks, Ben. This has been awesome. Stoked to watch that film and support you and see where your career keeps going.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah.